Hey guys, it's Toby Vance, Lost History of Eden. Today's presentation, we're going to be talking about a fact versus a theory in scientific thinking. A lot of times people get confused, mixed up on some of the terminology that's used in science, and particularly when you're talking about those who deny science, like the creation scientists, the young earth creationists, and so on. You'll tend to hear them use terms inaccurately. For instance, in the debate around evolution, many times you'll hear creationists say something along the lines of, that's just a theory. Okay. When they say something to that effect, it tends to show that they don't really know what it is they're talking about, because a theory really in the scientific realm has no bearing on whether something is factual or not. Theory is merely an explanation of how an observed fact occurs. Okay, and so we're going to see today in today's lesson, there's a distinction between what we call a fact and what we call a theory. Okay, just pretty basic distinction between the two, but it's one that a lot of people many times miss if they're not familiar with how those terms are used in science. So that's what our lesson is about today. So let's jump right in it and look at the difference between these two terms.
Okay, so we're talking about fact versus theory in the creation evolution debate. Many times you'll hear creationists say something like, evolution is only a theory. And usually by saying that, they're implying that it's nothing more than just sort of a guess, maybe an educated guess. In saying that, though, they're showing that they have a very gross misunderstanding of how the term theory is used in science. And they're showing that that misunderstanding takes place really in two areas that I want to talk about today. The first is that it is true that evolution is a theory, but evolution is also a fact. In science, we make a differentiation between theories and facts. A fact is something that is observed. It's an observed piece of data. A theory is something that explains that observed piece of data. For example, every day we all see the sun come up in the east, cross the sky during the day, and then go down in the west. Since the beginnings of humankind, we've witnessed this big ball of fire that moves across the sky every day, and we call it the sun. It's an observed fact. We know the sun's there. We see it every day. Yet at the same time, scientists have a theory about how the sun functions and how it burns. That theory is an explanation of the how of the fact of the sun. So we know, at least from the theory that's put forth today by scientists, that what we think is actually going on is that within the core of the sun, there are all these nuclear reactions taking place that are occurring due to the result of a massive amount of gravitational pressure, because the sun is so dense, that pushes down on all of those hydrogen atoms in the core of the sun. And in doing so, creates and sparks all of these nuclear explosions that keep the sun burning. That's our current theory about how the sun burns. Could be someday that maybe that theory's proven wrong and we come up with a better theory to explain how the sun functions. That's not going to change the fact that we see the sun every day in the sky, and there is something that we call the sun. So that shows the differentiation between a fact and a theory. Now, Something else that also has to be known about theory is that the term theory in science doesn't have the same meaning uh, that we use when we use it in just everyday common language. For instance, you may have a friend who says something to you like, "Oh, I have a theory about how OJ killed his wife." Usually, when someone uses the term theory in that way, uh, they're really meaning nothing more than just kind of a guess, their opinion, sometimes not even a very educated one at that. That's not the way in which we use the term theory in science. Theory in science refers to a body of evidence that has been tested repeatedly and has stood the test of time uh, through these repeated experiments. And usually, something that has the status of a theory uh, is a very strong body of evidence. It's not something that's just a guess. In fact, we have a term in science for something that's more of just an educated guess. We call that a hypothesis. And that's usually what a creationist is referring to when they use the term theory. They're thinking of evolution like it's a hypothesis, just an educated guess. Um, but evolution is not a hypothesis, it's a theory. And we have used repeated multiple experiments to prove that the theory holds up. And it has held up for a long time. Now, the current theory in science about how evolution takes place is what we call the neo-Darwinian theory. That theory uh, is our best current explanation for how evolution occurs. We put that theory to the test in many repeated experiments, and it's held up very well so far. Now, as I said before, it may be someday that we find a better theory that accounts for how evolution occurs. Doesn't mean that the fact of evolution is any less true. We know evolution's a fact from multiple uh, lines of evidence that prove that it's a fact. And so, even if the theory itself is wrong, the fact of evolution remains. And I have many more videos that show some of those lines of evidence that prove that evolution's a fact. So when you hear about scientists and evolutionists debating various aspects of the theory of evolution, and many times critiquing some of those elements, that doesn't mean they doubt the fact of evolution. It only means that they're having debates about the theory of evolution itself. So the fact of a piece of knowledge isn't dependent upon the truth of the theory. The theory, as we said, may ultimately turn out to be wrong, but even if it does, the fact still remains. I like this quote from Stephen Jay Gould, who was a paleontologist, famous paleontologist and biologist, who passed away several years ago. This quote clearly shows how we make that differentiation between what's a fact and what's a theory, and how, even though evolution is only a theory, it is also a fact. As Stephen Jay Gould says, well, evolution is a theory. It is also a fact, and facts and theories are different things, not rungs in a hierarchy of increasing certainty. Facts are the world's data. Theories are structures of ideas that explain and interpret facts. Facts don't go away when scientists debate rival theories to explain them. Einstein's theory of gravitation replaced Newton's in this century, but apples didn't suspend themselves in midair pending the outcome. And humans evolved from ape-like ancestors, whether they did so by Darwin's proposed mechanism or by some other yet to be discovered.
Okay, so hopefully you can see that helps you in understanding the difference between what we mean when we say something is a fact versus what we mean when we say something is a theory. Okay. Very important to understand that distinction, particularly in the debate around evolution, okay, because the misinterpretation of those two terms many times is used to kind of muddy the waters when we're talking about evolution. And as we have here in our series that we have up on evolution and the evidence for the fact of evolution, okay, those videos are geared towards just showing you that evolution is a fact, that we have observed evidence that evolution has occurred. It's not anything to do with the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution, currently what we call neo-Darwinism, is the explanation for how evolution occurs. Okay, we don't get into that here. There's lots of debates around that are still ongoing, and many elements of evolution still are not completely understood in terms of how evolution works. And there's still debates going on within the scientific and biological community, nailing down a lot of those things that still aren't completely understand and trying to draw them into the overall theory of how evolution works. That's not our debate, okay? Our debate is over the fact of evolution, and in terms of establishing evolution as a fact, that's clearly demonstrable, as we show in our series on evolution, which if you haven't seen, go check out. We have a 3-part series covering 3 different pieces of evidence that confirm once and for all that evolution occurred, okay? And if you haven't checked out any of our other videos, okay, we have our introductory video that's out, the video on things to consider. That's kind of our foundational video for the approach we're taking here on this channel. And so if you haven't seen that one, make sure you see that, and then also check out our videos on flood geology and why flood geology is not the best description of what we see in the geological record, and therefore cannot be true based on plenty of evidence that we see. So if you haven't seen that series, check that out also. And if you haven't done so, make sure you hit the subscriber button, and we'll see you next time.